This is the RELAXNOW espresso coffee maker. It's the model JH5010E. This is a 120 volt appliance and it does take 1350 watts. So it's a pretty high current draw while it's running. I was sent this to review for free. If you wanted to purchase one, it would cost you about $100. So it's kind of at the lower end of the espresso machine, but at the higher end of the coffee machine market. So inside we get a manual, and we have in this nicely corrugated and recyclable packaging the espresso machine itself. And in addition to the espresso machine, there's various accessories. So a couple of the moving parts, like this lid here and this cover there, are taped down, so you do have to remove some tape. And the tape is doing a pretty good job of coming up without leaving much adhesive. There was just a tiny little line there, and putting the tape over and pulling it off again removed that. So this tape is kind of designed to be removed and not leave a big mess behind when you do that. Now, when you first start it, I'm getting a little bit of adhesive residue where I started it, but nothing really from where it is. And if you put this over that residue, the residue will stick to the tape. So we have in here a rear compartment you can take off, fill, and then slide back on it. And there's a valve in the bottom here, so presumably it's not going to drip while you're carrying it around your countertop. Right, this little cover slips off, and then this thing can pull out and be cleaned separately. Right, so close up on the accessories. They have the portafilter handle. They have a 1-shot and a 2-shot filter, and these filters have a little notch in this edge and this little divot here. So if you put them in, they'll go in that way. If you rotate them, they'll kind of lock in place. But even if you have not rotated them, and if you have it, right like this, there's this little handle thing that will flip up. And so you can flip that up, push it with your thumb, and keep it from falling out as you're knocking stuff out of there. And so you basically choose, the 1X or the 2X espresso filter size. And then it has a coffee scoop and tamper. It's basically, this is polypropylene plastic. Out of everything, accessory-wise, this feels the cheapest, but it's also the thing that'd be pretty much easiest to replace. These guys, they're not super high quality, but they feel reasonably well made. Now the steam nozzle is in for shipping, but you can rotate it out like that. Most of the controls are on the touchpad here, but you do have the manual steam knob. The manual mentions a stainless steel frothing pitcher, so it's not included with this unit here. You'll have to provide your own stainless steel frothing pitcher if you want to froth milk with the steam. So it does have 4 little suction cups that will stick it down to a flat, non-porous surface. So size-wise, this guy doesn't take up too much counter space. It's basically less than 6 inches wide, maybe 7 if you include, the clearance for this knob. Front to back, it's about 12 inches. I'm leaving maybe 3 or 4 inches behind it also for an outlet. And even so, that's only coming in at 16 inches. So as coffee makers go, it's relatively small. Now it does have this on-off light, which I believe is off currently, but it's flashing. And so if you're the type of person that hates flashing lights, it's got kind of a little flashing light. When you push it on, it'll turn on solid. I don't think there's any downside to having the display on all the time, but the flashing when it's off is kind of annoying to me. It does have kind of neat little light up things here. I don't think it's an LCD screen. I think they're just kind of like images with lights behind them. So you have a minimum number of options here. There's the steam function with the steam nozzle here that stows out of the way. And then you can basically say, hey, I want a single shot, 2 shots, or make an Americano with basically as American coffee with lots of extra water. Now they do also have the espresso cool feature where you put ice cubes in the back and it will pressurize with cold water going through the espresso. So you can think of that as a kind of a cold drip or a cold press equivalent, where it's basically pushing cold water through the espresso. And the main idea here is that instead of a drip coffee maker, it's high pressure, so it's like 260 psi is their 20 bar pump in there, so it pushes the water through at a very high pressure. Now to use the cold or iced coffee feature, you're supposed to let it cool down for 15 minutes if you've previously done hot coffee or steam, so that the water will be cool coming out. Or if it starts off, if you're starting off with cool water, you can basically just start with cold water and off you go. So I'm going to try out the cool espresso feature first, simply because that way I don't have to wait as long to cool down. So this guy here has 2 nozzles and they kind of correspond to these 2 holes here. So if you're doing a single espresso, you want to make sure you're covering both holes. If you're doing 2 at once, you want to put your cups left and right so it pours into the 2 cups. Now these grounds are not strictly speaking espresso ground, they're just kind of for a drip coffee. So I'm just using drip coffee grounds in this guy, and we're going to hope it works out okay. So we will compact these guys in as well as we can. And you do have to wipe this coffee off the edge here. And of course, not having an espresso cup is an issue. So you put that in off to the left, twist it to the center point to lock it in place. Let's see if I have enough room. Yes, I do have enough room with that locked in place. Okay, we are going to hit the espresso cool button, and off it goes. And this is the first time I've used it, so it might take a little while to prime the pump and get the water flowing through it. Alright, we're going to run the water through one time without the portafilter to prime the pump. So there should be no pressure against the water here. Just vibrating my cup around. Alright, I'm able to get some water to come out of the steam knob by turning the steam arm there. So it looks like something is primed there. I don't know if that was heating up or not. I don't want it to be heating up. It feels cold still. We're going to just try the espresso cool function again. Oh, there's water coming out. Okay, I believe we have it now primed appropriately. So I'm going to go back and try this again with the coffee grounds. Alright, so that water is cold water. So now you're going to run some compressed high pressure cold water through those grounds. Definitely getting a little foam. My cup is walking, possibly because it's a glass cup, possibly because this thing's really slick, possibly because it vibrates a lot. Okay, well, we have some very foamy espresso there. I'm going to let that settle a bit. I'm sure the troubleshooting manual has something to say about if I have too much foam. It's probably not tamped enough. Alright, it says if the espresso powder is compressed very tightly, the espresso will run through slowly and there will be more cream. Maybe I was too energetic in my espresso powder tamping. Okay, so it looks a little thin to me. That's probably because it's cold brew and not, steaming hot. The foam has gone up to the top, so we have a decent amount of coffee here. So that's not bad. I think it's a little weak. I think a real coffee lover would want it darker than that. But it tastes pretty good and it's nice and cool. All right, let's see about cleanup. So we have all of the grounds in there. They look wet. There's a little bit of dripping coming out here when I released it. All right, so we can flip this guy up, turn it over. Tapping gets most of it out. I am going to have to rinse this to get the rest out. All right, rinse that out, got it pretty clean pretty easily, except for these two divots. So inside that divot, there's a black spot, and there's a black spot in this divot, which I'm pretty sure coffee ground stuck in there. Comparing to the 2X filter that I haven't used at all, there's no coffee in those divots, or in the divot here for this guy, but it is in there. So I'm going to be careful and spray the sprayer from the sink in there and see if I can get that cleaned out. Alright, I directed the sprayer from the sink directly into that. I hit it with the tip of a knife. It still looks a little dark. I think you're going to just have to live with a little bit of darkness stuck in those two divots there. Alright, got rid of the ice cubes. I filled this guy right up to the max line. So the messiest part of this procedure is the coffee grounds, and I had coffee grounds stuck to the bottom of my tamper and didn't realize it. So you really need a place for this tamper to sit where those coffee grounds won't get places. I'm trying to not spill coffee grounds, but I'm not being terribly successful, so you really want to do this over a plate or something to catch these grounds. I'm not going to tamp quite as hard as I did last time because I had a lot of foam. I'm not sure if that was the cool water or the fact that I tamped too hard, but I'm just kind of pushing down there with a decent amount of pressure, but not a whole bunch. And you can see there's coffee grounds here, so that will be a little bit of a mess, and then you have to wipe the coffee grounds off of this thing to get a good seal. Really, I think you need a brush or something for that. Now, when you're tightening this up, the coffee machine is light enough, you really have to put a hand on it to keep it from spinning around when you're tightening this. So it's a two-handed procedure to tighten that guy up. Okay, let's try the espresso setting. Now, this should take longer because it's having to heat the water up to near boiling. There's no temperature adjustment, it just has its own setting internally, and whatever it uses is what you get. Alright, the color there looks much more reasonable. It's much darker than with the cool espresso. The decent amount of foam still. It's reducing down as the foam turns into liquid. So I let this sit for about 3 minutes, and you can see the foam's gone down quite a bit. It looks very dark. So the temperature now is somewhere in the 115 to 113 Fahrenheit range. It was probably a bit hotter when it first came out of the machine. Now, if you've put the steam nozzle to the back to stow it, you cannot cycle around and bring it out to the front without removing the portafilter. Once you do that, you can bring it around the front. So probably stowing it would be just stow it right here. It's not going to stick out, and then you can just move it in and out if you need to use it. So this did not include a stainless steel milk frothing pitcher. I'm just going to test the steam generation here with just a stainless steel bowl. And currently it's just pushing out water. So I'm going to push the steam button here. The steam button is flashing. I believe we have to wait until the steam button stops flashing to be heated up for steam. All right, steam button is stopped flashing. I'm going to turn this knob. And as soon as I get it past that point there, it's definitely steaming this thing. I left this in the machine a bit while I was testing everything and cooling down. When you get the hot steam through the coffee there, it's definitely stuck in there better than when I did the cool espresso. So you might need to pry it out to get it started, and then let's see if the edges will come in. Yeah, and the edges come through a little better if you release the pressure in the middle. And they recommend occasionally just running hot water through this with the pressure to clean out the filter with no coffee grounds in it. Alright, this definitely looks like the color I would expect for espresso. It's bitter because I haven't added any sugar to it. I think it is about the right bitterness for espresso with nothing added to it. Alright, I had it at the max line. I made an espresso. I ran the steam machine for a while. I ran some extra water through to clean it out. I would say, you're going to get a lot of cups of espresso out of this before you need to refill it. So, this is kind of a refill weekly as opposed to refill daily type of thing, unless you drink a whole bunch of espresso. Okay. As a low-end espresso device, it seems to work pretty well once you get the water primed in the pump. The tamper scooper thing here is functional, but nothing fancy. You get two of these, the 2-cup one and the 1-cup one. They did not include a stainless steel milk frothing cup, even though they have the steam attachment here, so that would be a nice thing to have included, but they didn't. But at the low price point here, it has very easy to use. There's no settings to change. There's no heat or pressure adjustment. You basically pick essentially how much water you want and whether or not you want it hot or not. Alright, I don't like the fact that you need to use two hands, one to brace it and one to turn this guy just to get the thing inside. This did not come with the machine, but I'm going to test the steam milk frothing feature now. Okay, this guy's very hot, but the handle keeps all that heat away from your hand. Worked exactly like it's supposed to. So it felt like this guy could have been out a little more and maybe a little bit higher. I was having a little trouble hitting the machine when I was moving around with this here, but it did a perfectly fine job frothing the milk. Now I have maybe more than I needed here. But that's okay. So from a design standpoint, I think this knob should be on the other side of the machine, or the front of the machine, or the top of the machine, because you're kind of having to put both arms on this side of the machine, turn this one sideways, whereas if it was over there, you could control while seeing what was going on here. So, it's not horrible because usually you just turn it on, leave it, and froth milk and then turn it off. You're not like adjusting it continuously, but I think it could be better on the other side. So pulling out the drip tray and taking it over the sink to clean is super easy. Okay, So if you're looking to get a kind of bottom of the line inexpensive espresso machine to play around with making espressos at home, this guy seems pretty functional. It doesn't have any real configurability or customization in the pressure or temperature, but I've been pretty happy with just the espresso it makes on its own. I would like if it had included a milk frothing cup because it has the steaming attachment, but you have to provide your own milk frothing cup. I feel it's a little lightweight, so that you have to brace the machine quite a bit when putting in the portafilter and snapping it in place. Also, I kind of wish the steam knob was on the other side so you could control the steam knob while moving over here with your other hand, but those are minor nits, that it's a pretty low price point for an espresso machine. And I think, if you're looking to get something inexpensive to play around with making espresso, this is a pretty good option.